You know that feeling when you've been pushing this remarkably heavy boulder up a really steep hill all day?
Oh, yeah, we all know that one.
Right. You finally stop to catch your breath, you look up, and you realize the hill just keeps going.
It never ends.
Exactly. And not only that, but you suddenly get this creeping suspicion that someone else is hiding behind a curtain, actively controlling the gravity.
Yeah, I mean, it is basically the defining sensation of the modern condition, just this seemingly endless, Sisyphean task of the daily grind.
Yeah.
And we usually treat it as a tactical failure, right? Like a personal failure of productivity or willpower or time management.
Like we just aren't trying hard enough.
Right. We diagnose the exhaustion as a symptom of our own inadequacy.
But so for today's deep dive, we're looking at an excerpt from a text called The Hidden Spiritual Frameworks of Economic Power.
Such a fascinating title.
It really is. And specifically, we're unpacking a section titled The Secret of the New Civilization. And it argues that it isn't a failure of effort at all.
Not at all.
It claims the reason you're exhausted by modern life isn't because you're lazy, but because you are fighting a spiritual war using only economic tools.
Which is quite the statement.
It's wild. Let's unpack this, because to convince you that you're fighting the wrong war, the text has to hold up a mirror first.
Right.
It introduces us to this scene that is just, honestly, viscerally relatable for anyone caught up in modern work culture. You would meet this young entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and he's just sitting there, completely exhausted, staring at a ledger. And this ledger is basically a monument to endless hustle that's yielding, nothing but bare survival.
Yeah, the exertion is maximum, but the output is minimal.
Exactly. He's doing everything right according to the modern playbook,
Yeah.
but he's barely treading water.
He really represents that everyday reality of diminishing returns, and sitting across the table from him is his mentor.
Right, the older guy.
Yeah, the text describes this man as a, quote, quiet titan who manages hundreds of millions. So we have this exhausted novice, right, and the serene master. And the mentor looks at the young man's ledger and delivers that central premise.
The big line.
Exactly. He says, you are failing because you are fighting a spiritual war using only economic tools.
So what does this all mean? Because, it sounds completely counterintuitive.
It does.
If someone's business is failing, telling them they're in a, spiritual war sounds like a great way to help them go bankrupt even faster.
Right. It doesn't sound very practical at first glance.
Not at all. So before we go further, what exactly is a spiritual tool in this context? Like, are they talking about dark magic in boardrooms?
Mm-hmm.
Or is spirituality here just a metaphor for something else?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the text is deliberately expansive with that word.
Okay.
But as you read closer, it becomes pretty clear they aren't talking about, holding seances or reading crystals.
Good to know.
Right? Spiritual in this framework refers to the underlying unseen codes of human behavior.
Unseen codes.
Yeah, things like psychological leverage, collective belief systems, group cohesion, and the invisible narratives that dictate what we actually value.
Okay, that makes more sense.
So the mentor is basically asserting that economic tools, spreadsheets, investment strategies, time management apps, they only operate on the material plane.
Right.
They track the score, but they don't actually change the rules of the game.
Wow.
So if you try to win a structural, psychological battle for power using only a calculator and a business plan, you are fundamentally mismatched.
It's like trying to hack into a modern supercomputer using a vintage mechanical typewriter.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, you can type as fast and as hard as you want. You can stay up until 4 in the morning just hammering the keys.
Right.
But you're never going to breach the system because you aren't even using the correct operating language.
Exactly. And that mismatch is the core of the mentor's diagnosis. The text instantly, almost surgically, reframes economic struggle.
It really does.
It looks at the reader who, let's be honest, likely identifies with that burnt-out entrepreneur and says, your failure, your burnout, isn't because you have a bad business strategy.
Yeah.
It's not because you aren't waking up at 4 in the morning or grinding hard enough.
It's basically removing that huge burden of personal blame that hustle culture constantly piles on our shoulders.
Exactly. It shifts the blame entirely from the player to the game itself.
Right. You aren't playing the game poorly. You're just playing the wrong game entirely.
Yes.
Which is an incredibly validating message for a reader. But to explain why we have the wrong tools, the text takes a really massive pivot.
It does. A big historical detour.
Right. The mentor goes on this sweeping historical explanation of how humanity got onto this exhausting track in the first place.
Yeah, claiming that we weren't always running this isolated race.
Right, so the mentor argues that centuries ago, our ancestors thrived because true wealth wasn't just about accumulating material goods.
It wasn't just about owning the most land or having the most cattle.
Yeah, true wealth was anchored in communal rituals.
Right.
And these rituals bound people together, they guaranteed the harvest, and they created this unbreakable fabric of shared power and abundance.
So wealth was basically a collective state of being, not just an individualized bank account balance.
Exactly. But then the text points to two massive historical forces, colonialism and industrialization. And it makes a really radical distinction here.
Oh, absolutely.
It argues that these forces didn't just steal physical land or extract physical resources. They stripped away humanity's spiritual core.
Yeah.
The mentor says these forces pushed people out of natural abundance, forced them into concrete cities, deliberately broke their communal power, and ultimately reduced them to isolated individuals fighting just to survive.
That's a very bleak picture.
It is. And wait, here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to make sure I'm fully grasping the text's logic here, because it is a massive claim.
Sure.
Is the text arguing that urbanization and industrialization weren't just the organic results of technological advancements?
Like they didn't just happen naturally.
Right. The factories and the concrete cities weren't just built for efficiency and mass production. Are they saying they were actively, intentionally designed to break human connection, like a deliberate spiritual severing?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the text is building a very specific alternative narrative about isolation as a mechanism of societal control.
Societal control.
By arguing that moving from communal abundance to isolated survival was a profound spiritual theft, it suggests this wasn't just an accidental byproduct of human progress.
It was on purpose.
Right. It was a functional necessity for emerging power structures. I mean,
Yes.
think about the mechanics of control. An interconnected community operating from a place of shared resources and mutual support is incredibly difficult to subjugate.
Right, because they're self-sustaining.
Exactly. They don't need what a new centralized system is trying to sell them.
Because they have their own power source.
Yeah.
Like if my community guarantees my food and shelter through our shared systems, a factory owner can't easily force me to work 14-hour days for pennies.
Right. But take that same individual, disconnect them from their community, cut them off from nature, place them in a concrete city apartment, and force them to fight every single day just to pay for basic survival.
They're trapped.
Exactly. That person is entirely dependent on the system. They are compliant.
Because they have to be.
Yes. They are easy to control because their primary focus is narrowed down to next week's rent.
Wow.
So the text frames the entirety of modern industrial history not as a glorious ascent into enlightenment and prosperity, but as a systematic dismantling of human communal power to create a desperate, compliant workforce.
It takes the textbook history of the Industrial Revolution, the invention of the steam engine, mass production, the increasing standard of living,
Right.
and it flips it completely upside down.
Yeah.
It frames the rising material standard of living almost like a bribe.
A bribe.
A trade-off where you quietly hand over your sovereignty and connection in exchange for consumer goods.
And that framing sets up the next logical question the text wants the reader to ask.
Which is?
If the masses have been deliberately severed from their communal power and isolated into these concrete cities, who is holding the leash?
Who benefits?
Exactly. Who benefits from this setup?
And this leads directly into what the mentor calls the great, terrifying secret of the modern world.
The big reveal.
Right. The text pivots from this sweeping historical critique into outlining a core, hidden conspiracy of how global power is actually maintained today.
Yeah.
It reveals that the architects of this new civilization, the men who built the global monopolies, the financiers who threw up the skyscrapers,
Right.
they never actually abandoned the spiritual frameworks themselves. They simply hid them from everyone else.
The claim is that they fed the working class a strict diet of pure logic, science, and materialism.
Right. Pure facts.
Yeah. They heavily promoted hustle culture to keep the masses exhausted, distracted, and fighting among themselves for crumbs.
Wow.
Meanwhile, behind closed boardroom doors, the elite continue to use what the text calls the weaponized unseen to guarantee their dominance.
Weaponized unseen. That's quite a phrase.
It is. You have this stark duality, right? Logic and exhausting labor for the masses, and hidden spiritual leverage for the elite.
It really makes me think of playing a high-stakes game of Monopoly.
Okay, how so?
Like you're sweating over buying Boardwalk, you're obsessively counting your colorful little paper bills, you're trying to optimize every single roll of the dice.
Right, playing by the rules.
Exactly. You are playing so aggressively by the rules printed inside the lid of the box. But then you find out the banker has secretly been playing a completely different magical game the whole time.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The rules you're exhausting yourself over are structurally designed to keep you busy and distracted while they control the actual board from a whole different dimension.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the structural power imbalance the text is trying to convey,
Yeah.
and it distills this entire concept into one incredibly potent sentence. The mentor leans in and tells the young entrepreneur, every economic system is, and always has been, a spiritual system in disguise.
That is heavy.
Right, we look at a multinational corporation or a global bank or a stock exchange, and we see spreadsheets, quarterly earnings, algorithms, supply chains.
We see pure, cold, hard facts, the ultimate triumph of logic.
Exactly, the very opposite of anything spiritual or unseen.
Right.
But the text forcefully claims that no massive empire is ever built on facts alone.
Okay.
If every economic system is actually a spiritual system in disguise, then the logic we are fed is merely the camouflage.
You camouflage.
Yeah, the real machinery of power, the way dominance is actually guaranteed and maintained across generations, operates on a level of collective psychology and unseen leverage that has been systematically hidden from the public eye.
So it makes you look at a skyscraper completely differently.
How do you mean?
Well, instead of just seeing a monument to engineering and commerce, the text is asking you to see it as a temple to a hidden framework.
Oh, I see.
A framework the elite actively use while they tell everyone else on the ground floor to just keep staring at their ledgers, keep trusting the science, and keep hustling harder.
Notice the linguistic manipulation happening in the text here, though.
What do you mean?
The phrasing, strict diet of pure logic versus weaponizing the unseen.
Right.
By framing rational thought, science, and logic as the tools of the oppressor, the text is actively disarming the reader.
Oh, wow.
Right. It's preemptively telling you that if you try to use logic to poke holes in what you're reading, you are just playing into the elite's hands.
That is a fascinating catch.
Framing rationality as the enemy is a classic psychological tactic used to bypass a reader's critical thinking.
It's essentially saying, don't overthink this with your rational brain, because your rational brain was programmed by the people keeping you down.
Exactly. It softens you up for whatever comes next.
And whatever comes next is, well, the text doesn't just leave the reader wallowing in this bleak reality.
No, it doesn't.
It pivots sharply to force a critical, immediate choice. The mentor issues a final ultimatum to the young entrepreneur.
Yeah, he lays out the reality of the situation. He basically says, you now live in a society that demands you worship facts, while the elite secretly weaponize the unseen.
Right.
And he warns that if you allow this corrupted, fact-obsessed environment to dictate your grounding, it will forever dictate your economic and social chains.
You're trapped forever.
Yes. You are commanded to actively shape the environment you intend to conquer, rather than just being a passive victim of it.
But then, and this is where it gets crazy, the text takes this wild, almost jarring turn.
It really does.
After all this sweeping philosophy, the historical analysis of industrialization, the unmasking of the global elite, it drops a pitch.
A sales pitch.
Yes. The mentor says, the 30K Club holds the ancient framework adapted for this new era. And then comes the actual call to action.
Right.
Make your choice. More will be revealed if you are eligible. The registry is open at 30k.club.
It's such a shift.
We go straight from the spiritual devastation of industrialization into what sounds like an exclusive VIP lounge pitch.
It is a massive tonal whiplash. But, when you analyze the mechanics of the text, it is an incredibly sophisticated psychological funnel.
A funnel. Okay, break that down for us.
Think about the step-by-step journey the author just took the reader on. First, it builds an immediate connection by validating your pain.
Right.
The deep, isolating exhaustion of modern hustle culture is real, and the text says, I see you, and it's not your fault.
So step one, hook them with their own burnout.
Exactly. Step two, identify a grand external enemy.
Okay.
It takes that everyday burnout and elevates it. It says you aren't just tired, you are the victim of a centuries-long historical theft. It gives you an antagonist, the system, the elite, the concrete city.
Then step three, make them an insider. The mentor reveals this terrifying secret about the weaponized unseen. Suddenly, the reader feels like they have pulled back the curtain. They're awake while the rest of the world is just blindly staring at spreadsheets.
And then step 4, precisely at the moment of maximum tension, when the reader is reeling from this realization and desperately looking for a way out of this rigged system,
Yeah.
it offers a mysterious solution, the 30K Club. But notice what the text actively avoids doing.
What's that?
It deliberately leaves the exact nature of this ancient framework a total mystery. It never defines what the club actually does or what the practices are.
Oh, yeah. There's no syllabus attached.
Nope.
There is no bulleted list of daily habits or investment strategies you'll learn. It's just an empty mystery box with a shiny label.
Exactly. And that is where the phrase, if you are eligible, does so much heavy lifting.
If you are eligible.
It changes the dynamic entirely. If they just said, click here to buy our course on spiritual frameworks, your rational brain would kick in.
Oh, for sure.
You'd evaluate the cost, the time commitment, the credibility. But by saying, if you are eligible, it triggers our deepest innate desire to belong.
It makes it a challenge.
Yes, it turns a sales pitch into a test of worthiness.
Wow. You suddenly want to prove that you are part of the inner circle.
Right.
You want to be one of the few who hold the real power, rather than remaining with the exhausted masses who are stuck worshiping facts.
And so it forces the reader to visit that website not out of informed consent or rational decision-making.
But out of FOMO.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Burning curiosity, a desire for liberation, and a need to prove they are special enough to be let in. It requires a blind leap of faith.
That's wild.
The text uses the very psychological frameworks it claims the elite use to manipulate you in order to funnel you into their registry.
It is a brilliantly constructed trap.
It really is.
It uses your own exhaustion as the bait, walks you through a fascinating alternate history of human civilization, and drops you right at their front door feeling like you have to knock just to save your own life.
Yeah.
When you zoom out and look at what we've unpacked today from this single source, it's an intoxicating blend.
Absolutely.
You have anti-hustle culture sentiment, a sweeping historical critique, arguing that industrialization was fundamentally an act of spiritual theft.
Right.
And finally, this highly engineered, alluring pitch for a secret society promising the real keys to the kingdom.
And, you know, the value of analyzing a text like this goes far beyond whether or not you actually buy into the 30K Club's pitch or visit their website.
Definitely.
The text serves as a powerful diagnostic tool. It forces you to evaluate the invisible systems you are operating within.
Yeah.
It challenges you to ask yourself if the tools you rely on every day are actually capable of solving the problems you're facing.
Or if you're just typing on a typewriter.
Exactly. Or if you are, in fact, trying to win a psychological battle with a spreadsheet.
Which brings us right back to that feeling we talked about at the very beginning.
The boulder.
Yeah, that heavy sinking feeling of pushing a boulder up a hill while someone else casually controls the gravity. But there's a final thought to mull over today. Something that builds on the text's core thesis and brings it right into your daily life.
Okay.
The mentor claims that every economic system is a spiritual system in disguise.
Yes.
If that's true, what are the daily rituals you participate in without even realizing it?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like, is obsessively checking your banking app every single morning, endlessly scrolling social media for a hit of validation, or constantly optimizing your daily calendar to squeeze out 10 more minutes of productivity?
Yeah.
Are these actually modern forms of worship?
Wow.
Are these the hidden rituals of the concrete city? And if so, who exactly is benefiting from your devotion?